watching CNBC India.
Hello and welcome to Digital Revolution. I'm Aditya, Sapru, and today we are going to talk about Linux and the final frontier, the enterprise applications. Joining me today in the studio are Sachin Dabir, Head Enterprise Sales at Red Hat, and Mr. Sandeep Murdeshwar, CTO at Tata Share Registry. Later in the program, we will also have a conversation with Mukul Mathur, Country Manager Channels and CSI at IBM India. Sachin, why don't we start up with you telling us a little bit about what Linux is? There's an incredible amount of lack of clarity that exists. So who better than you to tell us what Linux is all about, especially in an enterprise environment?
Sure, Aditya. Let me start with complete history, give a little bit about the history, and then we will come to where we are today. As people know, Linux started in 1991 by Mr. Linus Torvald, and while he was interested in writing something on his own on Unix-like kernel, he invited recommendations from the people all over the world, and his interest was basically to see what the users want, not what he wants. And this is how this momentum of sharing, the community sharing that started, wherein lots of people came back and said, this is what we want and this is how it should be done. This is what is done in Unix and which we want it separately or differently. So Linux is some entire kernel came out of it, which is written from scratch with Linus Torvald taking a lead and getting suggestions from the world over. It got enriched over a period of time. It took 2 to 3 years, not more actually, and that's an incredible phenomena where we see people from world over contributing to a completely new operating system which was not done at all before that. And that gave rise not only just to a new operating system, but new way of computing, new way of development, and that was very, very different thing. Coming back to Linux, how it basically evolved is, having seen that the kernel is there, lots of people wrote about various applications around it, and when they realized that it's going to be a community development work, they evolved the standards as to how the codes will be written, how the applications will be written, how they will be integrated. So from the beginning, this modularity has been maintained, and this core group, they kept on improvising that, took the suggestions, did a lot of checks and balances, and kept on releasing the kernel one by one. By the time in 1995, when internet boom had started, they realized that yes, this is the great thing because it saves me a lot of cost. Because this was freely available, there were lots of gigs available to them at the time, and they simply took it and started using it. The result was that you had Apache's web server, you had Binders, DNS, and lots of other applications which were written and which were tested by millions of people. And so they are very rugged, they were robust, and they were being tested in live environment of the internet world, which was 7 by 24 by 365 environment. You can't have anything as rugged as that.
So that is what the word on the street is. Sachin, how is this? I mean, there's always a question in terms of the enterprise being very choosy in terms of what it is that they want, and obviously it's like a sleeping giant, as often people talk about enterprises. When they do actually imbibe something, they tend to take it with a lot more gusto than individuals or smaller entities would. Question is, in an Indian environment, what have your experiences been? How have the enterprises reacted? I know we're going to talk a little bit about it later, but I wanted your perspective in terms of how people approach this openness.
In India, when we started 2 years back, we went through a 3A program, awareness, appreciation, and adoption. We realized that there was a tremendous amount of awareness among the enterprises about what Linux is, about what choices are available, but what they were looking at in terms of how can I use it.
That was about Linux, India, and the opportunities it presents. It's time for us to take a break, but when we come back, we meet with Richard Stallman, the founder of free software platform GNU. We find more about that when we get back after this small break. Welcome back. Earlier, Miranda Tide of CNBC spoke to Richard Stallman, the founder of free software platform GNU. Let's hear it directly from the horse's mouth.
In 1983, I, an operating system developer, that's what my field was, I decided to make it possible to use a computer in freedom by writing a free software operating system. All the operating systems were proprietary, so you had no choice. To use your computer, you had to agree to these ugly licenses. So I figured by writing another operating system, I could give people another alternative, a way to use computers in freedom.
Right.
This operating system is called GNU, but most of the users think it's Linux. It's a misnomer that got started. We had almost every piece, but there was one important piece missing, which is called the kernel. That's the program that allocates the machine's resources to the other programs you run. And at that point, while we were still working on our kernel, Linus Torvalds in Finland wrote a kernel, and he made it free software using our free software license. And at that point, people put his kernel together with the GNU system. Well, his kernel is called Linux. So the system that people use is GNU with Linux added. It's more GNU than Linux, but somehow it caught on to call it just Linux, which is not really right. So I hope that you will call it GNU plus Linux. We're the principal developers. Please give us equal mention.
That was Richard Stallman, the founder of free software platform GNU. Coming back to Sachin. Sachin, you were telling us a little bit about Red Hat Linux. I wanted to know a little bit about what some of your experiences, prior to us going in and talking to what the client experience has been. I wanted your perspective on what are some of the key restraints that Indian clients have typically when you're trying to sell them a Linux-based solution or trying to drive them towards a Linux-based platform.
I would put it this way: the clients don't have actually any restraints. The restraints are in a different area. In terms of clients has got a choice. They got a great operating system. They got a number of applications running on that. It is the planning that makes all the difference. Because when the large enterprises or the governments, when they want to move their applications on Linux, they need a lot of support. They need some organization like Red Hat to stand behind it and say that we will be with you for all your applications throughout this life cycle, for supporting the infrastructure, for supporting the migration, for supporting this critical applications all throughout this, and that makes to the organization an important factor when they are looking for Linux.
We've actually always heard and felt and seen how, in as far as Linux is concerned, the evangelists have been people from the bottom. There's very often been a perception that there's been an incredible amount of effort that is required on the part of the evangelists to move the decision makers. Let's move on and ask a decision maker himself. We have with us Sandeep Murdeshwar from the Tata Share Registry. Sandeep, can you share with us some of the concerns you had when you first were offered a Linux solution?
Okay, I'll just put our technical infrastructure itself into context first. We have about 25 servers in Tata Share, and we carry about 4 million customer database records. Now, what we were scouting around for is an operating system which would be extremely robust, or most important would be sort of scalable. Okay. And Red Hat Linux seemed to be something which fit the bill. Okay. Our concern really was one of support. That was the big concern we had when we thought about sort of going in for this. And actually, in hindsight, I think that was not really a concern at all, because it's been fairly straightforward to get out of place.
Sandeep. We'll find out a lot more about the trials and tribulations of choosing Linux, working with it, and obviously the aspirations that Tata Share Registry has now that they have Linux. We'll take a short commercial break and we'll get back. Hold on to that thought. Sachin, what in your words is the future? How do you see the future for Linux in India specifically and globally?
In India, let me address it first. In India, it's growing very, very fast, and especially the adoption is happening at a rate which is we are also very much pleased with it. And people are putting their business critical applications. That's a very interesting and very encouraging fact. That is no more just internet, email and messaging things, but the business critical applications like Oracle applications and things like that. There are a couple of examples where even the ERPs are being put on Red Hat Linux. And that's very encouraging for all the customers, those who are waiting as enterprise customers to see what is happening, who else is doing what. That's on enterprise side. On the government side, we are seeing tremendous amount of appreciation of this technology and eagerness to adopt this, wherein a lot of work is being done in terms of right from ground up applications, migration of applications and things like that. It's moving in all the segments. Today, it's not restricted only to government or enterprises, but you look at healthcare, if you look at manufacturing, it's all across the segments that is going and it's growing. One very interesting thing is that, as Sandeep mentioned, initially most of the organizations, most of the customers have gone in for Linux to save the cost, and their experiences has been that it gives great performance as well. So the initial, though the initial thought was to go for cost, now it is they are getting a great performance, and that's been a good thing for the customers.
Interest and awareness. Very clearly, we seem to be at the intersection of interesting times. Will Linux deliver with all that it promises to? Will the enterprises move in India outside to the extent that Red Hat Linux would want them to? We'll find out, and you can be sure that we'll be watching the beat with you. Thank you very much, Sandeep, for joining us today.
Thanks.
And thank you, Sachin, for joining us today. Thank you very much for watching us. We'll be back next week with another interesting event for you. Thanks.
The Digital Revolution, presented by Infosys, powered by intellect, driven by values, in association with Sun Microsystems.